Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are. Welcome to the Third Culture Convos podcast. I am Majid, joined by Sheikh Rashed. What's up, bro?
Sheikh Rashed, wow, that's quite the honor.
Yeah, bro. Well, today's discussion, you're gonna school me. We're gonna go to school together, and I think you're well versed in this topic. This just happened 5 hours ago. I just before pressing record, I went on BBC, and 5 hours ago, the headline was that the Tottenham Hotspur's managing director, Fabio Paratici, has been banned worldwide by FIFA. He was already given a 30-month ban in January for fake accounting, and that's been upheld. Uh, Earlier, a couple weeks ago, Patrick Vieira, this is completely unrelated in the sense that it's sports related, but it's not. That's financial fraud that this Fabio's been caught for. Patrick Vieira is out of a job in the EPL, which means that the EPL has no black coaches. And indeed, throughout Europe, there's I don't think anyone can really find a black coach. So my question is, in general, when you take a step back and you just look at all the sports news that has sort of come out, Ja Morant he was waving a gun around from the NBA. The Phoenix Suns have had toxic ownership. Deshaun Watson, who was accused multiple times and proven for abuse and sexual harassment, he signed a multi-million-dollar contract. So now my question is, when you take a step back and just look at sports as an entity by itself, how toxic is it? This entire ecosystem.
So it's incredibly toxic. It starts in my mind in the youth camps from when you start playing high level sports at youth level. So when you have kids who are playing whatever sport in North America, basketball, football, hockey, baseball, all the big ones. The moment you start playing where you have to try out for a team, but even still, there's an element to the toxicity as well. That's not even, you don't necessarily have to try out for the team sometimes, and I'll get to that in a second.
Folks, we haven't even gotten to the professional leagues, by the way, and like Rash is already stumbling on like the first step, how toxic kids sports is. We haven't even gotten to the pros. So like the financial fraud and stuff, we haven't even gotten to the big boy pants. We're still putting on our shoes, Velcro shoes. Continue, Rashid. Sorry, I just want to point this out.
To be honest, we're just in the process of getting out of like training diapers. Like So, and it starts the parents that have like these high hopes for their kids to be like, they're going to be the one in a million to make it to the big leagues, whichever league that is. Then you have coaches who are not necessarily the most responsible, when I guess you can say, when it comes to their actual coaching techniques and how they treat kids and how they treat players and how they treat other coaches, like in the reputation within the league. There's a lot of good coaches out there, don't get me wrong, but then there's the level of win at all costs from like the age of 10, right? So just a quick caveat. So for example, in the Netherlands, for example, and I think it's the same thing in Germany, they don't start keeping score until they reach like, I think about 14 or 15 years old. Before that, it's all about development. It's all about skill development. It's all about camaraderie. It's all about how to be a part of a team, these type of things, right? So, and a lot of it too, when it comes to like football in those two countries, the specific skills and techniques we're talking about, they barely even play full field. So they're playing on a smaller pitch where they're in tighter spaces. So you have to learn how to make quick touches, for example, like how to play within small spaces so that you can better develop your skills in these types of situations. And then you start getting into like keeping score, but then you end up at a professional academy, essentially.
When you speak, by the way, of those skills, it's not just motor skills of quickly passing the ball, of finding open space, of finding the man or the person, your teammate. Mm-hmm. It's also the communication, the verbal skill involved in communicating and accepting criticism within after the play is
Mm-hmm.
done or whatever. There's a whole bunch of other soft skills within that skill
Mm-hmm.
set, those tools that we talk about, not just the motor skills. I want to be clear. I also do
Yeah.
want to just remind the audience, we might sound really harsh in this topic, but it's because, and I'll speak for Rashid here, I know this for a fact, we both love sports, whichever sport it is. We both love it, and as kids, and as we're completely amateur, we don't get paid for any sports. We love the actual athletic, hold the skill set and this and that. And so when we look at these topics, it hurts us to speak about them like this, but you do have to speak about it, as you have to call a strike, right?
Yeah. So I want to juxtapose it, for example, with the quote unquote so-called developmental system in Canada, for example. And because I have quite a few friends of mine who are actually coaches at the youth ranks, um, and they do their best when it comes to training their kids, right? Um, but from the outset, there's this unnecessary pressure on these kids to like perform and to do well, and you're not going to get anywhere if you don't put in the work. And I get it, you have to put in the work, but you also have to know how to be able to motivate these people without making them feel like shit.
Pressure from where? Pressure from where? The parents, the coaches, both of them, other players?
The coaches. It starts with the coaches and how they coach, and how they set up their camps and all that kind of stuff. Then you have, in a sport like soccer, for example, the pressure is not as great because it's still a niche sport in Canada. But we can talk about hockey right now if you want, because with hockey, when it comes to hockey, it is immensely pressure filled from the beginning. From when you start playing rep hockey, it is like, you have coaches who are just complete dicks sometimes. You have coaches that are not responsible in how they actually coach their kids. And then you have the other kids, some kids who basically are like headhunters, as we say, who just go out there to hurt somebody. But then the other juxtaposition I want to get to is the difference between trying out and payment. So there are, and this is a new system in baseball as well that's been happening, the academy system in Canada for hockey and baseball. So it's different than the rep leagues where you have like, AAA and AA and all that kind of stuff, the different age groups and then all that kind of stuff. What basically an academy basically is an academy. You pay to go to an academy. And so Jerome McGinley has one, for example, here in BC. And I know this because he's been heavily trying to recruit a friend of mine's son he's 15, he's playing with overagers. Actually, his team just won the under 17 AAA hockey championship in BC. So like he's
Well
playing
done.
really high level hockey.
Well done.
Yeah, and he was drafted by the Tri-City Americans, which is a team in the WHL, which is junior A hockey here. So they're high school kids. They're just below the pros. Basically, from there they would get drafted to the NHL, and then they either play in the NHL if they make a team, or they get sent down to the minors. And so he's been drafted by a team. They're going to figure out what they're going to do with that. But Jerome McGinley is running an academy here, and he's been after this kid for like 2-3 years now. And every year it comes back up. We want him to come play for us, want him to come play with us. But the thing about the academy system is that, as far as I understand, you're just playing tournaments around the way. But the thing is that they're getting exposure because NHL teams are looking at these academy kids now. But here's the thing, and it exists for baseball as well. There's baseball academies in Alberta and BC as well. You don't necessarily have to be the best to go to these academies, though. They have levels within the academies, like the top ones. Yeah, typically speaking, the majority of those players, they have to try out, they have to make the team. But then there's a lower level in some of the academies whereby if you have the money and you know the right people, your kid's going to be playing there, even though they probably shouldn't be.
And they'll
so
go
then you
further.
have this issue where,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you have this issue of someone there being there just because they're paying to play.
But then can they advance because of that reference or that resume?
Potentially, if they improve their skills and they start to get noticed, absolutely. But I'm just saying in terms of like their natural skill and ability, it's different than those who would be, better, I guess you can say, that actually would have more of a chance.
And when you say academy kids, we're still talking right now basically before pre-university kids. When we say academy, this is everybody under the age of 18. Yeah, right.
We're talking about high school kids.
And so now let's move into the college years, because one of the most surprising things for me, I went to Syracuse University, and it's got a massive, massive basketball program. Carmelo Anthony is the most famous one. Jim Boeheim's the coach there for the last 30 years, even though he's only ever won one championship. But that's none of
Mhm.
my business. And I was really shocked by just the sheer amount of resources that go into sports and athletics versus I've always come from like my high school show. We were notorious as being like, there's no sports, there's no arts, there's no culture, there's no creativity. It is purely science based, math, physics, biochemistry, that background. And like school,
Mhm.
university, academics meant books, learning, education, knowledge. And there is plenty of all of that within sports, but not in the way it's currently being used. Would you agree with that? In terms of especially American
Well,
sports, not American colleges, American universities, and the sports.
yeah, there is the stereotype that, what did the famous athlete major in university? Oh, they majored in communications. Well, what the hell does that even mean?
Communications.
Like, what
Always
is
communication.
communications in the first place? But then there's some others who actually have a plan going forward, and they actually do something that will enable them to have a career after they finish playing their sport, because you're not going to play your sport forever. Football, for example, you're not, like the average age of someone who retires is what, 30, depending on your position. And so, like, imagine this. You've played a high level sport from when you were, let's say, 12 years old, and you've gone through the ranks, and you've gone to college, and you are a college football star, let's say, and you're a running back. Oftentimes, some of the running backs, they say they're starting to hit their prime around 28, 29. But even when they hit their prime, their body is so destroyed by the time they're 32, 33. They have that little window of actually doing anything in their career. Then what do? They start to slip off, and they either become the second string running back or the third string. They become a journeyman, quote unquote, going from team to team type of thing. You need a
Ezekiel
plan
Elliott
after
from the
that.
Cowboys. Ezekiel Elliott from the Cowboys is
Yeah,
exactly currently in this situation where he's now being either
exactly.
demoted or yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So what
but
do you
by the
do?
way, go ahead, go ahead.
Your options could be, let's say, for you want to stay in sports, let's just say, you do something that's sports medicine related in university, so kinesiology, or something related to sports rehab, whether it be massage and that kind of stuff. So at least it keeps you in sports. Or if you want to go into a more business minded route, then you do something like business administration. And then you go into management of some sort. And they're the ones that do communications that end up being broadcasters, which they don't necessarily, some of them shouldn't necessarily be on television. Actually, I'll tell you what, last night, I don't know if you watched this game last night, but if you didn't, you should have. The Pelicans versus the Warriors was a freaking game, dude. Like, the game was freaking amazing. The Warriors were down like by 20 in like the first quarter, whatever it is, they came back to win. But the game itself overall was amazing. And don't let me forget my next point, because there's a portion of that game that was a complete um, iteration of toxicity within sport. Um, a
Why
perfect example of toxicity within sport. And I'll just give
what
you a name:
happened?
Draymond Green. I'll just say that much.
Oh
um,
man, Draymond.
but what
Wait,
was my
well,
I
I wanna take a step back for 1 second because you took the when we started talking about colleges and sports, you went in the into
mm,
and this is the thing. There's several different angles and several different layers within when we talk about the sports world. So you went from you took the athlete's perspective that I as an athlete will
yeah.
sit in a class and get a degree and maybe I'll make the show maybe I'll get injured at the show after a couple of years, and then what do I do? That kind of thing, or the athlete's
Hmm.
journey. But I would like to switch it for a second to the institutions. Should
Hmm.
universities be this invested in sports? Should our culture, just in general, are we okay with um, this sort of thing where, like, quite literally, tens of millions of dollars a year go into the sports gyms, and like $2 goes into the library? Or any sort of
Right.
anything, because for example
Yeah.
in business school, let me give you like, now that I think about it, the
Hmm.
grand prize for your business idea, that they had like a Shark Tank week or whatever. You go in, you present your idea. The grand prize for that was $500. $500 in today's economy for a business is next to nothing. But you can every Saturday when the Syracuse basketball team plays, Nike or Air Jordan or Adidas or whichever sneaker company is sponsoring them will send them a brand new pair of shoes every game. That's $200 times at least 10 players. You've got $2,000 right there. And I'm not even blinked an eye. I'm not talking about the amount of sports networks that come from out of town that stay in the hotels, the gym facilities, the amount of money spent on the gym facilities and all of that. So it's just, you don't think from an institutional perspective, the fact that these are academic institutions that are basically at this point, they're not even pretending to be academic institutions. Like, should we not degrade their paper, that degree? Should it not be a little bit demoted then? Because we know like you're a sports school and you proudly exhibit that, and that's where you get all your money. You show your balance sheets.
So,
and one more thing. Within that college sports world, there is scandal after scandal after scandal.
Yeah.
Because it's so invested, because a school is so invested in just its sports identity, they then start doing recruitment policies. They start doing giving the players money. They start doing skirting the books, not showing it on the books, and getting women from thingy and like hooking them up and stuff. It's like it gets really toxic really fast.
So 2 points. One, and when we talk about the funding for sports, we have to accentuate the fact that when we talk about funding for sports, it's for men's college sports. And depending on the school, the two largest ones always is football and basketball when it comes to university programs. Some schools put a lot of money into hockey, for example. There are a lot of popular hockey schools. There are a few popular baseball schools, but typically speaking, the majority of the money goes to football and basketball. And a lot of it comes from donations, quote unquote, from alumni, former players, former students. But a lot of the money comes also from, selling paraphernalia. For example, all like Michigan Wolverines, they make loads of money off their paraphernalia because college paraphernalia is so prevalent in North America. Like clothing companies have entire lines devoted only to college paraphernalia.
The Syracuse line, every 6 months it changes. They get new designs. It's the same orange-blue color, but it's the same S, but they'll just put vertical lines versus horizontal pattern the next time versus the Argyle pattern.
So, first that women's sports does not get nearly as much money as the men's sports do. But then the thing is that really what's happening? The reality is what's happening, and I still agree it's a toxic environment that for decades now, clothing companies have just been just living off of, when it comes to their college lines, living off the popularity of college sports, period. And the reason for the popularity of college sports, just a quick history lesson, is before professional sports actually started in the United States and Canada. Forget about Canada, because you know what? College sports means nothing in Canada in terms of our local colleges and universities. It's just as popular in Canada when it comes to college basketball and college football from the United States as it is in Canada in terms of a following of those schools in Canada. But so, for example, people say, how the hell do they get 80,000 plus people to watch a game for University of Arkansas or whatever it is, like these places where you're like, what the hell is going on here? Like it's in a town of 10,000 people and you have 80,000 people in the stadium, let's just say, as a stupid number. And the biggest reason is because we're talking about areas of the United States where for a long time, there wasn't any professional sports. College programs, especially football and basketball, started when there was not any established professional leagues. So they're going to go and watch that local university. And over the years, they start building larger stadiums because they're like, well, we can fill these stadiums because we have such high popularity. Now, things change over time. Now you still have popular universities like, in Washington, University of Washington, for example. It's in they play, I can't remember where they play now, but it's not far from Seattle. You have the Seattle Seahawks, but you still have University of Washington drawing big crowds for their football games. It's just that, like, over the years, it just got bigger and like just larger and larger and larger. Depends on the market. Sorry, yeah.
Syracuse is exactly that, by the way, what you're saying, that they don't have a big professional team anywhere nearby. The Bills are owned by Buffalo, and that's a rival town. So they're not going to rep those guys. And so the SU basketball team by default becomes the SU men's basketball team originally becomes by default the identity for all of them. So anyone who's coming in, anyone around the area, that's what they're forced to gravitate towards almost.
Yeah. Although Syracuse football is still fairly large, they've had some success over the years.
They piggybacked
but I
off
know
the
what you're
basketball
saying.
program.
Yeah.
All of whatever, it's mostly
Yeah.
marketing. Like when I was there, they started doing a marketing drive to get the basketball
Right.
fans over as football fans and be the Syracuse family.
Yeah. Also, keep in mind as well, when it comes to the universities, there's a huge amount of tickets that go to the students directly, whether it be a part of their tuition fees to go watch the sports. I'm pretty sure Notre Dame does that. It's a part of your tuition fees to go watch. I think you can decide to opt out of it if you want. But if you do pay, then you get your ticket for Notre Dame football. No one really cares about Notre Dame basketball. So yeah, there are things like that. But can you blame these companies who are making coin off of this? Because as a company, you look for opportunities to make money. That's your purpose.
I'm not, I've never asked about the player. I've not asked about the companies. My pinpoint, this is what I keep going back to, is the institution does not seem to, the actual university, the board of directors or whoever runs these universities, they never seem to actually looked in the mirror and said, what are we? Let's be honest, or at least let's be honest about who we are. Are we an academic institution or not?
Right. So remember, for a long time as well, like as a college athlete, if you got any type of payments from anyone, whether it be just like a random person giving you $5
the
to go buy a
boosters,
lunch
they're
meal,
called boosters. Yeah. I remember the name
boosters,
boosters.
you basically go to a tribunal and you're possibly banned
NCAA. Yeah.
with the NCAA rules. However, because the schools are making so much money off the likeness of the player, off the appearance of the player, the name of the player, but what's changed now? There's a new program that's come in called NIL, where players can sign with this organization and make money off their name, image, and likeness. So the NCAA has created a caveat of some sort. I don't know the full details about what they did and how they circumvented it. But even with this now, where players can make money off their name, image, and likeness, certain universities are now getting shat on, I guess you can say. So the University of Miami, for example, they're getting shat on for the recruitment via NIL for the basketball program. And it's been quite a big news recently with the March Madness going on, because Charles Barkley said it recently. He said, we're going to have at some point 20 schools, 20 programs that are just going to completely dominate college sports through this type of initiative, where players are just going to like bounce from school to school, year to year, and eventually they'll make themselves eligible for whichever draft it is based on whatever rules they have. But that is a reaction to the fact that for so many years, so many decades, universities were making money off of a kid. And this kid never got any kickback. And not only that, if you're an athlete and you're there playing a sport, your job is to play that sport. You can't go out and get a part-time job, because all of your time is basically lined up between playing your game, your practices, and then school.
Communications 101.
But the point is, they still tell you still have to go set X amount of classes. You still have to you have to get X amount of grades to maintain your scholarship, let's say, for example. If you're lucky enough to get a scholarship, there are the players that get a full scholarship. There are those that get a partial, and those that get nothing.
No, but even then, there is a discipline required to manage practices, games, and then your
Hmm.
actual academic life. Even if you are coasting, so some of these universities will give you the athlete a tutor for every class, but you
Yeah,
do have to meet that tutor once a week for an hour or whatever, and that does take discipline to at least even fulfill those
absolutely.
commitments. And there are some professors who take attendance only of the athletes to make sure that,
Hmm.
like, I don't care if that you got put in my class. I'm not just letting you coast. You're going to earn something out of it. So it does require some commitment, and it absolutely is. I think it started, now that you mentioned the nil thing, it started with the video games, right? NCAA was
Yeah.
making a lot of money, more than Madden. And by the way, we haven't mentioned there's a one elephant in the room throughout all of this, especially to
Hmm.
do with college sports. And as we segue from college into professional sports, in my opinion, the perfect segue is, we haven't mentioned the amount of money spent on betting and sports gambling in college sports. The reason why a lot of these institutions force themselves to invest in their sports thing is because there's a lot of money going into gambling and betting and them as a brand name. Whether you're going to bet
Hmm.
on them to win or to lose, you still have to recognize that school as something, right? You have to be a horse in the
Hmm.
race. You have to be a
Hmm.
recognizable horse in the race. And there's been a lot of I think hypocritical behavior when it comes to sports betting and the sports world, uh, in my opinion. So if you look at, now this is professional sports, if you look at the NBA, 10 years ago, I distinctly remember them having a huge fit about, like, we have to keep sports betting away from us, and Tim Donaghy has ruined it for all of us. And oh my God, Tim
Hmm.
Donaghy was a ref who point shaved, and there was a federal case against him, and he claimed that there's a lot more WWF fixing styles, WWF style fixing in NBA than
Hmm.
you, the viewer, would imagine. Just as a refresher. And now, when you watch, you can't watch in NBA, that Warriors Grizzly game you mentioned. You couldn't watch a minute without seeing some sort of sports betting name, website, or something out there. Whether it's a stadium
Yeah.
name, whether it's on the sponsor, whether it's on their
Yeah.
jersey. And it's sort of, they did a complete 180 in 10 years, that, like, we don't want anything to do with this, to, like, yo, this is part of our core brand identity now.
Hmm. And a lot of the narrative when it came to allowing the betting was basically saying that, well, it's a new era now, it's a new world. We might as well get involved because they're betting anyway. Like, betting's being done through Vegas anyway, so we might as well profit off of it somehow as a league. You know?
And I don't know, it just seems like the decisions are made quickly, but they're very toxic decisions. They're very self interested, self motivated decisions. It's never about the sport. This is my thing.
Hmm.
We, like, oftentimes in all of these toxic elements, we forget about how simple the sport itself is, and why we actually, why we fell in love with it. The, like, D2, Mighty Ducks D2, where Coach Bombay has to go back and, like, resharpen the skates because he's forgotten about it. He's become Hollywood.
Yeah. Who was there? Was that recent? There is that recent basketball player. He was out on injury for a while, and he ended up doing a whole bunch of parlays. But then he bet on his team, or he bet on an NBA game, and then he was under investigation for illegal betting. He's like, I was just betting, and I put a bet in my parlay, not realizing what I was doing. I can't remember. I just heard about this last week, and I can't remember who the hell it is.
I don't know who. I didn't hear that story. I heard another story yesterday about the Wizards player Bradley Beal. He got heckled by a fan, and he jumped into the crowd and started, like, beating on the fan. And the fan started the heckling because he started shouting at Beal that, yo, because of you, I lost $1,300 on a bet.
Uh, right. Because of
And
you, not because of the fact that I clicked the button and said, you know what, I think Beal's going to have a good game or not, or whatever he was betting on. Take responsibility for your shitty bet.
Well, let's go to a different topic here for a second. In terms of responsibility, this is something I've wanted to discuss. Michael Jordan was picked third in the draft, in the NBA draft in 85, 86, right? Tom Brady was
Mhm.
picked in the sixth round. He was the 199th pick overall, which means that there were 198 players that the experts thought were better than Tom Brady, and six of those were quarterbacks, the position he
Okay.
plays. Uh, like, where does this sports expertise come in? Why do these people, like, should we believe these sports experts, even the people in management? Like, what gives them the right to think they're better than anybody else? The way they walk around, that I'm the general manager of this, or I work in the big back office of that. Historically speaking, you missed Tom Brady, you missed Michael Jordan. Why am I supposed to believe anything you guys kind of say?
Well,
Rashid was not expecting this. And I can go with one
no,
more
it's
example.
it's
Can I
it's.
go one more example, please?
Mm,
Kwame Brown used to play for the Wizards. He was drafted by the Wizards, and what's he reminds everybody that when he was drafted by the Wizards, they picked him to lead the team. After they picked him, 2 months later, a fellow named Michael Jordan came out of retirement. And so the entire
mm,
team's philosophy changed. And it wasn't about Kwame Brown anymore and building around him.
mhm.
And it became about Michael Jordan. So now Kwame Brown's entire narrative throughout his career has been shrouded by the back office people. But they marketed him as one thing, but then they switched the plan on him, and that's it. Like, and he's the one who has to deal with the mismarketing or the misperceptions. So, like, sports experts, Russia.
Yeah. So I mean, so you can say these people we're talking about, these sports experts, these general managers, etc. They rely on their scouts, for example. So their scouts, they go and they watch these players play, and I've seen it firsthand with my friend's son there. Um, like these scouts, that's what they do. Like they go and they look for the next for like the needle in the haystack type of thing, and that's their purpose. And I've had quite a few scouts on my flights and everything as well, NHL scouts. um, you would like to think they know what they're talking about, but it seems like oftentimes management ends up screwing things up. So for example, one of the biggest examples of failed management in North American sports history was the Vancouver Grizzlies. Everyone thinks that Vancouver isn't necessarily a basketball city. I think it could have become a basketball city. I think now that is dead because of the mismanagement, the poor management of the Grizzlies. Because management just, you think that they knew what they were doing, but in the end they didn't. Like Brian Big Country Reeves was their big initial draft pick, and then from there they just made horrible decisions in personnel, and you basically alienated an entire city from the NBA market. Um, but then you have other teams that have done a very good job over the years in terms of recruitment and drafting and all that kind of stuff. And so I hate the Patriots, but I give them credit for a long time under Belichick. They've done a really good job in terms of having a system and filling in the gaps in their system. They might not necessarily be drafting the best player at that position. However, they feel that that player can play the best in their system in that position.
Tom Brady
Um,
being one of them.
mm, So I'm curious. You bring that up. I wonder what they saw in Tom Brady in the first place, because he at one point he was a third string quarterback. He didn't play. He actually didn't play regular games till his senior year in Michigan. So I'm like, I don't know what they saw in the guy in the first place. Like, it
They
was just
probably just
like,
saw an arm. Literally, it was a body, this is my
yeah,
point. Like, that body became the greatest quarterback of all time. This is like, I hate the Patriots. I hate
yeah.
Tom Brady, but you have to respect his output. And the thing is, he was so misvalued. And it was the same with Muhammad Ali, by the way. Now that I think about it, the boxing experts back in the day made him the greatest underdog at 22-1 when he fought Sonny Liston.
Hmm.
They gave him no chance, even though he kept telling them, guys, like, I'm going to whoop this boy. I'm going to whoop him like nobody's business. And yet nobody gave him a shot back at that time.
Yeah.
He was 22 to
So
1.
there is an interesting thing about the NFL as well, in the sense that um, from like the TV deals, like the TV contracts and all that kind of stuff, every team gets the same amount from the NFL based on that, to, as like a payout. And then after that, their own personal money which, box office sales and paraphernalia and ticket sales, that kind of stuff, that's their own personal money. So the more seats you sell, obviously, the more money that you have, which goes towards better facilities, being able to hire better coaching staff because you have more money to pay them, that kind of stuff. You have more money to pay players, but then contracts get complicated with players as well with the NFL when it comes to the cap and guaranteed money and all that kind of stuff, right? But then other sports don't have this. So it's like, so then I look at teams like Jacksonville for a long time, the Jaguars, and I'm like, man, you guys are starting from the same starting point in terms of like just a big wad of cash. How are you so shit for so many years? Like Washington, they've been shit for so long. Like now we're talking about what you're asking. How do we trust these management, these supposed professional management people when they've just been building shit teams for so many years?
Manchester United. Manchester United is the prime example. This is a brand that was given to Manchester United was the biggest brand in world footballing history while Alex Ferguson was there. The Glazers bought this brand about 2 years before he left, somewhere around there. So he leaves, and then they're left with a golden brand that they've run into the ground right now. They haven't won anything. They just won the Carabao Cup this year. But for the last 10 years before that, they hadn't really won anything significant. And they had given weird contracts. Phil Jones, for example, is still on the books. He still shows up to the training ground. He hasn't played for the club for 5 years, but they've still. And by the way, the reason I brought up United was because the owners have consistently, quite literally, filled their pockets while the team has gone lower and lower.
Quite literally, like they've used this model of providing the club with a loan for whatever purposes, but the club has to pay back the ownership group this loan at whatever tax rate. So they're just making money off of United.
Or even Stan Kroenke for a while. If you were an Arsenal fan, he ran a very. See, this is where, is it toxic or is it not toxic? Or what? This is where the ownership model in general seems very toxic for me. Just it'll always be because Stan Kroenke for Arsenal, for most of the time, he's happy finishing second, third, or fourth as long as the club continues to make a financial profit. He will invest the bare minimum for the maximum return. He doesn't want to win. He's quite clear in that. And the fans for a long time were very frustrated that, what's the point in even supporting this at some point? If you know you're not going to be number one, why even try?
And they were very open with their policy for a decade. We're doing this to pay back the debt of building the Emirates Stadium. There was no beating around the bush. They were paying back the debt of building a new stadium in North London.
So my question is now, after all of this discussion, and we haven't even really.
But we're not done yet. We're not done yet. Because my beloved Liverpool right now is in a similar situation where FSG, the ownership group, is basically taking on the model of we spend what we make. It's not FSG putting in their own money. What have they done recently? They've done a few things recently that have improved Anfield. So they've put in money to build a new stand. They've put in money to expand corporate boxes because that makes more money. But the whole concept has become, we'll spend what we make in terms of player sales. But I think a lot of the new ticket sales, for example, is going to go to pay the debt of the renovations. It's not necessarily going to go into the club, which is why they've been on this whole thing where they're looking for an investor.
Liverpool,
a minority investor.
Yeah, just any source of you guys pay for the additional whatever marginal cost is, you guys pay for it. Basically, we're not paying for anything.
And you'll get a 10% stake. So let's just say that for a 10% stake, we want you to pay a ridiculous amount of money. I don't know, $300 million, let's just say, for 10% in the club. And you sell it by saying, well, you know what? In 10 years, you're going to double, triple, quadruple that amount because the club is going to progress and its value is going to get better. So you're going to make back that amount and then some.
Yeah. Liverpool's, that's both Liverpool and United. Okay. we've talked about 1 second.
Also,
I'll
the
get back to
narrative.
that point.
I'll say the narrative related to Liverpool's changing going into the summer. I think they've realized they can't do that. I think they've realized something has to be done this summer because it's just been a disaster this past season, and they know that they can't survive on that. They know they have to do something this summer. So anyhow, continue. Go.
It would have been really disastrous, but that 7-0 at least saves the season. It really saved their season. At least it gave them something unforgettable to
One
remember.
of the little caveats of joy this season was beating
And
United 7-0.
Liverpool is one of these clubs. I hate them, but they're one of these like punchy underdog clubs. Even with the 3-0 AC Milan 4-3 that night in Istanbul. I mean, they always seem to manage. They're very Pakistani. When they're like completely doubted out is when they're going to perform, and when they should be
Yeah. But
performing, they're completely.
there's an exception to the rule. And the exception to the rule for Liverpool is a certain club from Spain. Okay. Madrid will always beat Liverpool. And I hate it, but I have to admit it. And I had this rant with you and Wasim, and it, I mean, I can just say it on air. It's always a situation where Madrid, because of who they are, always has, for the most part, 3/4 of their club top-rate players in each position. Whereas Liverpool would have top-rate players in 3 or 4 of their positions, maybe.
Yeah, you're lucky Wasim's not here. I'll say it for him. Hala Madrid. Yeah, Liverpool is not beating Madrid anytime soon. I don't even know.
Oh,
at
God,
this
it's not
point,
happening.
at this
It's not
point, there's a
happening.
mental block. At this point, it's not even about the game anymore. It's so dug into their psyche that it's just like you, as a Liverpool person, you would hear Madrid and you start shaking instantly, and vice versa. Madrid people hear Liverpool and start laughing. They're just like, "Bring them on, whatever."
Although there was quite a bit of a little camaraderie going on at the end of the second leg in Madrid recently between Liverpool and Madrid, where they played "You'll Never Walk Alone" at the end of the match, which is quite nice because Liverpool did a little in memoriam of the Madrid executive who passed away recently, just before their first leg in Liverpool. So. But also it's weird because Liverpool and Madrid are being tied together for different reasons. So like over the past few years, they've played in finals over the past few years, and Madrid has won them. And but then last year you have the whole fiasco in Paris that I don't know how much they actually work together in the background against the Paris police and UEFA, but I would say that helped kind of break some of the animosity, more so from the Liverpool side towards Madrid, because there's no animosity from the Madrid side towards Liverpool. Like they look down on us and be like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, you might be one of the best clubs in England, biggest clubs in history, but we're still Madrid. You fuckers. But exactly, their nose is way up high. But at the same time, because of that whole situation, it's funny because, oh my God, the toxicity. We want to talk about toxicity. So the toxicity related to this. UEFA completely dropping the ball in terms of whatever happened with their ticketing system. The Paris police completely dropping the ball in terms of proper crowd management. Like they never did the type of crowd management that they did for that match before. And Stade de France has hosted many international sporting events previous to this. And they've never had this thing where they bottleneck people into like gangways and alleyways leading up to the stadium, and then closing off certain gates that were never closed off before for other events. I don't understand what the hell they were doing. And then you have the Paris police not even enough of a presence, where you have like roving gangs attacking Liverpool and Madrid supporters, and then you tear gas people at a fence. Like, what are you fucking thinking? And then UEFA comes back and says, "Oh, hey," after months and months of blaming Liverpool supporters, because they're the majority of supporters there, because that's what Liverpool supporters do. They just go hoping to get a ticket. And at first, Liverpool's like, we'll accept the refunds, but there's certain caveats. And Madrid's like, fuck you with the freaking refunds. We're going to sue your freaking asses. And I think that was the perfect thing to do. So that's why I'm saying I don't know how much coordination was between Liverpool management and Madrid's management, but I feel like there wasn't enough, and there should have been more. And I feel like some kind of camaraderie is developing out of these situations between the two clubs.
there was that Champions League final. I want to compare that one to the 2020 Euro 2020 final in Wembley, which also saw
Mm-hmm.
inside the stadium there was crowd fan trouble. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A bunch of people. So now I want to so with these two examples, um,
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about toxic ownership a little bit, and we've also even talked a little bit about like players and their lifestyle and the choices they make sometimes. Let's talk about the fans for a second, because how toxic are the
Well, we
fans?
haven't really talked about the players just yet
We haven't, but
because
like there's
there are examples.
we can all agree that like there's plenty of toxic players, and that's the thing. These days there seems to be every day another example of a toxic player, which is why I wanted to have this sports conversation, because it doesn't, we just see the players and say, oh, toxic, but like that's what I'm saying is we know about the players. We don't even need to, for example, we don't even need to discuss, because we accept Deshaun Watson. I'd mentioned John Morant waving a gun.
Mm-hmm.
There are toxic players. We accept this every day in the news. There's something or another. Joker, the vaccine, and the Aussie Open. Ownership. We mentioned a little bit about the Phoenix Suns, and then these different models: the Glaziers, Liverpool, FSG, Stan Kroenke, and stuff like that. Ownership in general, and ownership also includes the academic institutions that breed a lot of these athletes. Now let's move to these
Mm-hmm.
fans. Like, how toxic are fans? How forgetful are fans? How drunk are fans? How much are fans the problem within this ecosystem of toxicity? And I'll give you a different, completely random example. When the Super League, the European Super League in football was announced, all of fandom got together, all of football fandom, the top six clubs, so-called top six clubs, their fans got together, and for 1 second, the footballing EPL world was united in their hatred of the ESL, the European Super League. Within the moment the Super League capitulated and announced that they're not doing it, everyone forgot about it. And do you get what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, how toxic or how dumb or where is the fan hand in all of this? I don't accept that like we have enabled the players to be toxic. We have enabled the owners to be toxic and to run these as financial operations. No.
Well, I mean, here's the thing: fans demand things, right? Fans live vicariously through these athletes. So fans identify with whatever team that they support, and oftentimes to a violent extent. Um, and it becomes a part of their identity. Like it's who they are. Like how many I used to be this way. I don't do it as much as I used to, but like all of my clothing was basically whatever sport teams that I supported. And I matured from that, I would say. But their demands to win games and win championships and these type of things and have the top players so they can do these type of things puts pressure on the management group to run it in a way that they will win. So they say, well, if I don't have a good team on the field or the court, whatever, or the ice, whatever sport we're talking about here, we're not going to have fans in the seats, which means that we're not making money, which means that we can't invest in good players and coaching staff, et cetera, et cetera. So like it's like this endless cycle of toxicity in a sense, because your grassroots level essentially is your fandom, which then influences what your management does and influences how they can operate.
And the fans themselves, like I mentioned the Brad Beal, he's cussing at the player and saying, yo, you made me lose this amount of money. Or we talk about Vinny Jr. and the racist abuse he gets, or the four English footballers, when they missed their penalties, all of them were black and they all got singled out or groupified as individuals. Like where does it stop? Like, if the fans are this toxic, why wouldn't if they're the pillar, if they're the foundation, like how would we
The thing
change this
is
even? Or
that
what do we do?
players are not seen as humans.
Brutal but true.
fans don't look at these people as human beings. They don't. Oh, is that the ice cream in the background?
I
What
was
are they
trying to put
serving?
it.
What are they serving?
That's the
I
that
love
guy
it.
that music is the igloo music. That's the igloo, like the brand igloo.
Nice.
Oh, that's his thing.
But like, or is he going around with like, what is it? What's that Faluda? What is it called? I can't remember. I don't know.
Faluda, yeah. No, that's for more if you have the
Mm.
car. This guy brings you the chalk bars.
Oh,
This
okay.
guy's the old school chalk bar, lollies, your standards.
Oh, nice. Okay.
The greatest hits.
Right. So, what was I saying before I got distracted by my childhood of an ice cream truck? um, but they don't realize that these players have personal lives. They have their own personal struggles as human beings. They have their own depression issues. They have their own. A lot of them have substance abuse issues. And that affects the way they play. You have to consider, we're not talking about robots. We're talking about players who are on the road all the time. They're traveling up and down on planes throughout the country. You get tired. I mean, obviously you're conditioned, but at the same time, there are times when you're just not at your top level. And so you as an athlete, over the years of playing your sport for the different ranks that you progress through, from like youth level, et cetera, you learn how to mitigate those type of things and learn how to push through, as they say. And then you have injuries and you have all this kind of stuff. But the thing is, so this guy's, he's yelling at Beal saying, I lost $13,000 because of you. It's like, well, he had a shit game. Why did he have a shit game? I mean, probably slept like crap the night before. He's probably feeling sick. It's cold and flu season. Like these type of things happen. So that also spurs an element of the toxicity, because you have to learn as a player at some point to be able to cancel that out and not allow it to affect the way you play and not allow it to affect the way that you prepare. Not let it affect your relationship with your teammates and your coaching staff, with your family, all these type of things. I mean, we talk about toxic players in the past, and a lot, like AI was a guy, for example, who said, I've made it to the big show now, and you expect me to stop hanging out with my friends that I grew up with when I had nothing, type of thing. They're gangbangers, fine, okay, whatever. But I mean, they're my friends. Like, they stuck with me through thick and thin. But you have a certain group of people around you, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good for you. It doesn't look good for the team. It doesn't look good for the league, because you start questioning, what's this guy doing in his personal life? Lamar Odom, unfortunately, got, severe drug and substance abuse. But what drives people to do this? A lot of it is the pressure from the toxicity from fans, from management.
From a fan perspective, so this is something I've seen. Again, I followed sports, all sports, from the moment I could read, write, or anything. And the one thing that has constantly struck me is the number in the off season just keeps getting larger and larger and larger. So what I mean by that is player contracts are just getting more and more money constantly. It's like it started off at a million was the benchmark, was the oh my God, record breaker. 10 million became the record breaker. 50 million became the record breaker. 100 million became the record breaker. 500 million. My question is, from a fan perspective, will there ever be a number that's just too big that they're like, this is disgusting? This, in my opinion, and I'm saying this personally, I think the amount of money that we give to entertainers, I'm saying categorically, even as a fan, I'm telling you, I think this money, the amount of money we give them, even with the mental health and all, to play a game is ridiculous. 50 million, 60 million, 150 million. I think it's ridiculous.
It depends on the sport we're talking about. So if we're talking, football has a cap, usually the big money goes to either a big player quarterback or a running back. Every so often it will go to a wide receiver. Typically that's where the big money goes to. And then hockey has a different system that's been around for some time, and they call it the annual average value, which affects a cap of some sort, but whatever. Baseball doesn't have a cap. It's just luxury. There's a luxury tax. Baseball is one of the biggest exceptions because baseball teams make money off of their TV deals. And so they don't care. The Yankees don't care. They'll pay the luxury tax if they go over whatever the perceived cap, quote unquote, is, but it's not a hard cap. But they make so much money off their TV deal. The Dodgers make so much money off their TV deal. The Padres have been, despite the fact that the Padres are fighting with the Dodgers in terms of region when it comes to regional broadcast rights, they're still making a lot of money off their broadcast rights. So baseball is one of the biggest exceptions where there's a stupid amount of money going. Like Machado just re-signed a deal. He just signed a new deal. He signed a deal with the Padres 2 years ago, and he just re-upped his deal for another 13 years, some like extended it for another couple of years, whatever it is, and he got an additional, I don't know, 100 some odd million dollars out of that. Like, well, Jesus, like, come on.
That was baseball is where actually the one sport where I constantly read ridiculous contract numbers. Barry Bonds, I think, started it.
Oh, just wait.
Years, 80 million.
Just wait. Just wait, because Ohtani is coming up soon.
Yeah.
You want to talk about stupid money? Shohei Ohtani is coming up soon, and I'm terrified to see what kind of money is going to be offered to him for 10, 12, 13, 14 years.
So will there ever be too much?
Insane amount.
Do you think, from a fan perspective,
he's gonna
the guy working, the guy drinking his beer at a rundown, shady ass bar, will he ever say, "Man, this is it. I can't watch this. This is just depressing now"?
I don't think so. I don't think there's going to be enough people there are people who are going to do that, but I don't think there's going to be enough people who do that. I want to make a bold prediction and just say that whatever team goes in for Ohtani, they're probably going to offer at minimum 12 years at like $550 million, like something ridiculous, like even more than that, actually, probably closer to $600 or $700 million for like 12 years.
You can buy Pakistan for that money, bro.
What's that amount per year? I'm sorry, you're the math guy. Give me a number. So let's do this quickly. You know, just 650 million divided by 12.
50, like 50 or something, right? For like 50.
Yeah, we're looking at just under $55 million a year. But also, Ohtani's a different precedent maker because he's the first player since Babe Ruth to play both ways.
But that's still, like, I get what you're saying. The skill set is super rare. I get it. I fully understand, but that's where, like, the market in general. How did we even get to? I'm not blaming Ohtani. Yo, brother, go out and make $1 billion. I want you to go out and make as much as you as the individual. I'm okay with making money. It's the institution and the culture, because the institution determines our culture more than the individual. The individual is an agent of change, but these are the change makers. They are the taste deciders, right? Like, the individual can go ahead.
It's baseball, for example. If we're talking about baseball still, it's baseball as a league that allowed it to happen because they never brought in a hard cap. And baseball allowed teams to make money in different ways. So baseball allowed it to happen. So then teams like the Yankees, for example, from the 90s on, spending exorbitant amount of money, and then other teams followed suit over the years. The Red Sox did it for some time. Then the Dodgers started doing it in the early 2000s, and then the Padres have been doing it in recent years. It's because baseball as an institution and their financial structure allows teams to do this, but there's only a certain amount of teams that are capable of doing it. Having said that, baseball actually, when we talk about parity in terms of like championships won, World Series won, it's actually more balanced than other North American sports are. Everyone thinks that the Yankees win it every year, but they don't.
No, you're right.
It's perceived that they do. Everyone assumes that the Dodgers should be winning it every year, but they haven't.
When the Diamondbacks beat the Yankees, that one, like 2000, Randy Johnson, that's when I realized that. And then the Marlins right after or right before. Yeah. That's when I was like, wait a minute.
Well, they've won 2, for Christ's sake.
And randomly, like out of nowhere kind of things, right? Like Lester style, like, woo, what?
What happened?
Yeah, after and all those years, the Yankees paid too, like paid to win, but yeah.
So yeah, I mean, baseball's allowed these type of salaries to become a thing. But things are changing in baseball. From what I don't know full on details, but things are changing related to broadcasting and that kind of stuff in baseball. So things might change. They're starting to go the streaming route, which might
You're
affect the regional broadcast.
you're stuck on the rules, all right? You're like you're very attached to the real life cases. I'm asking a very hypothetical case that regardless of which sport, will there ever be a point where the fans will say like Michael Jordan is not allowed to make $1 billion in a year, or we're never going to get to that stage. People are so institutionalized by
No,
sports that they will allow it.
because
Do you,
you're always breeding a new generation of supporters, regardless of what sport it is, and they'll continue to be supporters.
and within that, their kids are generally then also forced to be supporters, or you'll see their kid pictures with the same jerseys and the same things. And
Yeah, and then you breed new supporters.
one thing that surprised me about America in terms of sports was the lack of growth in the American sports industry, in the sense that they keep reinvesting in the same 4 or 5 sports as opposed to trying different things. The culture is not open to trying. For example, I would have thought that in my 30 years of living, I would have at least seen cricket grow in America at some point. It should have taken a stranglehold, or even a niche sport like squash. I would have anticipated that more and more people would have started, but when I went there, they're very much ingrained into just watching Super Bowl 5000, not cricket one.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? And even
Yeah.
soccer, for example, football, it hasn't been accepted on a grassroots level. It's much more top down. Do you get what I mean? Like Nike is
Yeah,
telling you to
soccer is
watch
still very
sports.
niche.
Nike is telling you to watch soccer as opposed to the fan wanting to watch soccer. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, it's niche in the United States in the sense that there is a fan base for it, but it's not as large as other sports, and they're trying to grow it. So you have certain markets in the MLS, for example, where I was actually quite surprised. So Atlanta, when they started in the MLS, in their, what's it called in Atlanta, whatever stadium, I can't remember the name of the stadium where the Hawks play, the same football stadium. They were getting like 80,000 people to games in Atlanta. I'm like, I had no
Even
idea
your
there was any type
Vancouver
of soccer
isn't
culture.
Whitecaps, aren't
No.
they like?
No. They don't even sell the top bowl in BC Place. It's only the bottom bowl, and even that is barely
Toronto
filled.
does. They took Toronto. Loves their football team now. No.
No, it doesn't sell out anymore. They've been steadily increasing the capacity at BMO Field, but no, there's a lot of empty seats. Even when they're doing well, there's still a lot of empty seats because they built that east tier, the top east tier, upper tier there, and oftentimes you barely would get halfway.
No, so
Like
MLS, I do agree.
No. Here, I want to talk about this. There's something I need to bring up though, because Canada last night played a CONCACAF Nations League match in Toronto against Jesus. It wasn't Curacao. Who were they playing? Honduras. The winner of that goes to the semifinals. Canada won the game, and they're going to play Panama in the semifinals. If they win, they'll probably play the United States in the finals in June in the Nations League, which is good for it. It's a great opportunity to be a moneymaker for the CSA and the Canadian sport business, the CSB thing, which is a complete farce. But here's the thing. Toxicity, money, premium seats in the lower bowl in BMO Field was going for $145 for a Nations League game for Canada against Honduras on a Tuesday night, a year and a day after they qualified for the World Cup for the first time in X amount of years in the same stadium. The ticket prices were $145 for premium seats. And I'm like, you just missed. They weren't even the upper East tier stand that I'm talking about. They didn't even sell tickets there. They didn't bother selling the tickets, or they sold tickets and then they told people, yeah, you're being moved to the lower bowl now. But I'm like, hold on a second. And Craig Forrest, he tweeted about this and he's like, what the fuck? How are we supposed to grow this game? And how are we supposed to get kids in the stadium? Because that's what you're supposed to be getting in the goddamn stadium. It's kids to generate a new generation. You outprice them out of it. I don't know if he replied to my tweet, but I said, call me crazy, but how about they should have done this? $50 for the premium tickets, $30 behind the goal, $20 for all the upper tier seats. And on top of that, family packages, 4 tickets. Each ticket includes a hot dog and a drink for $100 in total. And then on top of that, you give heavily discounted tickets to soccer associations around the GTA. You just needed the stadium filled with people. That's all you needed. And so I was actually watching Tim and Friends, and James Sharman was on, and he was like, the CSA actually hired a company to help them decide how to charge tickets. And this company told them, you should raise the ticket prices. And Sharman's like, so clearly this company has no idea about what the soccer environment is in Canada. You just miss an opportunity to fill up a stadium, get butts in the seats, and develop a new generation of people. A year after making the World Cup finally.
They
toxicity, stupidity, mismanagement, all of it.
They want to be exclusive. This is the crazy part, is like sports is all about inclusivity, is about working together and figuring it out. So like, even if you have a weakness, maybe that can be a strength. You don't know. Maybe that weak, that's the whole point of strategy and tactics and tinkering, and is to like figure this stuff out, but they want to be exclusive with this. It's funny you say that. You reminded me.
Soccer is a sport like basketball that is not exclusive in the sense that all you need is a ball and a playing surface.
Well,
unlike hockey and stuff where it's more expensive.
Yeah, it is more inaccessible. Absolutely. You reminded me though, my contractor in the U.S. When he was working at our place, he took a weekend off, and I'm asking him like, so what happened? Where'd you go? What'd you do? He's like, I took my kids, 2 kids, to Foxborough to watch the Patriots. And the entire trip, he's like, it took me almost $2,000 because like it's gas money over there, it's parking over there, food for the kids. You guys think it's like $10. It's like $40 by the end of it. And like, I'm not even including me. We've not gone to ticket prices yet. We've not gone to parking outside. Like, there's every single thing. He's like, it cost me, for me and 2 kids, it took almost $2,000. My dad used to do all of that in $300. It took him, 1 guy and 2 kids. It takes $2,000 now. How accessible is that? How like doable is that? Are we talking about the kids? Like, Wu-Tang is for the children. I don't know if professional sports is for the children anymore. Wu-Tang is for the children. No?
Well, I mean, no, it's clear. It's clear that now it's become, a lot of sports have become for the rich elite people, whoever that might be. So a league like MLS, for example, it's complicated. A league like the MLS, some teams have good packages for like ticket packages and whatever to get butts and seats and that kind of stuff, and other teams simply don't. Baseball, for example, though, I mean, obviously more well-established sport in the United States. A lot of teams have been suffering for a long time due to mismanagement. You know, you see Cleveland, for example, they've been pretty good they've been improving recently, but they still don't sell out every game. And no one really does in baseball anymore, except for now, probably the Padres are probably going to sell out nearly every game this season. The Dodgers don't, because traffic in LA is a horrible mess. People don't want to go to Chavez Ravine to watch them because it's so tough to get there. Public transit sucks in that city. But then there's other teams, for example, for a long time, you know, I was reading something where Milwaukee, for example, has this whole thing where you get a ticket, like it's like a family zone package thing, and you get a ticket and you're seated in a certain part of the stadium, and it's cheaply priced for the purpose of getting families in there. Or there's others that are just simply, you know, you get a ticket for $20 and you get a hot dog and whatever. But there's another thing too where they're doing this. Quite a few teams are doing this actually, and the Blue Jays are doing this year as well because they've done major renovations to they've renovated the home run fence, they've renovated behind the home run fence the seating behind it, they've renovated the bullpens, and in the upper levels from like 200 and up, they've put in like social decks, like different types of social decks in like restaurants and stuff like that. So you don't have to sit in your seat for the game if you don't want to. You can just go there and hang out there for it, and each one has a different theme, right? But what the Blue Jays are doing, for example, they're doing this thing where you can just pay $20 for entry to the social deck only. So basically, you're paying $20 for standing room. But then other teams, I've seen a thing where other teams, they're doing this thing where they're charging something like, I think, $50 for a month for standing room only, and you just go whenever you want. Which makes sense because you just want to get people in the stadium, because what's going to happen? Someone gets in the stadium at a cheaper price. They'll buy more beers, they'll buy more food and that kind of stuff, because so now you're making money two different ways now, as opposed to someone going in having to pay $150 and I already paid $150. I don't want to, but then again, if you're paying $150, you probably have enough money to buy as much booze as you want while you're there. But there are different initiatives that teams try and do to get more people in the seats. But again, it does go back to the question that you're asking: at what point do sports leagues outprice themselves in the eyes of fans? And it's
for example, what you're mentioning, it's really good, those initiatives. I'm glad somebody's at least trying something for the commoner, the bloody commoners. Yeah. But it's almost too far between. And in that same stadium that you're mentioning that I'm going to be in standing crowd, Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez, or whatever the cultural reference is of today, the hot power couple, will be given the better seats for free, even though they kind of hate the sport, and they hate the sports fans. Like the people they're going to be sitting with, they kind of hate those people. They call them losers in private, but they get the cool hot seats. Or like the Spike Lee seat, and I don't mind Spike Lee because he seems like a proper fan. Like, I don't mind him. I'm just saying that seat is usually the latest rapper, the rapper of the month. And you're like looking at
Drake is trying to be the Spike Lee of Toronto. And I'm like,
Nav, and that's where Nav Bhatia, the Sikh Raptors cheerleader guy.
From day one.
I like that. That's the thing. He's the guy who I want to see in the front. I respect an organization that respects him. But when you Kim Kardashian was at the Arsenal game, the Champions League one that they lost, and it's like, man, no, I'd rather take a kid from Liari, any one kid from the slums, and they should be sitting up there, man. That's not fair. She can afford a seat anyways. She's been given that seat for free, number one, and she gets the best seat in the house, and she's not even watching the game. She's just there to be seen at the game, right? And that's the part that sucks. And part of that comes from, unfortunately, one of my sports heroes, Muhammad Ali. He completely changed sports history. The Garden used to be the sports people. The moment Ali went to fight Joe Frazier in the fight of the century in 1971, that was when Frank Sinatra, Diana Ross, all these celebrities came for that one fight, and that's where it started. So as much as I love Ali, he's the one that gave all these athletes. He's revolutionized the sports industry just in general. For good or bad, who knows? Because much of the toxicity can also be down to him. You could argue. I as much as I love him, his treatment of Joe Frazier was completely wrong. I don't know where I'm going with this, but yeah.
No. This is good though, because you reminded me of what I wanted to circle back to with the name that I gave you, Draymond Green, about last night's game, because it got really chippy. It got really violent. It was borderline 1970s basketball where a fight was going to break out on the court. And Steve Kerr did something really very smart as a coach, where back in the day they wouldn't have done this. But when things got really heated, he subbed him off right away. It got to, at this point, Draymond Green already had a flagrant one. He already had a technical. And then there's this whole altercation where they were looking to see that possibly if there should have been a technical against Draymond or not. And in the end, they said it's just a normal foul. It's a common foul. There's nothing going on here, whatever. But then, like, it was an inbound for the Pelicans, and Draymond was right there, like, just pushing up against Murphy, and he was like, and Kerr's like, get off, because if we keep you on for 30 seconds longer with that ball being inbounded, it's gonna devolve into a mess. But the toxicity part that I want to talk about in relation to Draymond, in terms of, like, as you were just saying, how Ali treated Frazier, Draymond at times becomes a toxic distraction to his teammates, and that's it. It became that to a certain extent in last night's game, where, like, things were happening. The flagrant happened and all that kind of stuff, and he's off to the side. He's clapping and he's yelling at people and he's screaming. He probably was trying to motivate his players, but at the same time, like, he's egging on the opposition. So, like, the game now devolved. So, like, as well as a player, at one point, do you be like to your teammate, for example, say, dude, shut the fuck up.
Enough.
Like, you're trying to motivate us. You're trying to motivate us, but you're not. And I feel like Draymond does that a lot of that type of toxic behavior as well.
We might. I kind of agree with you, but, like, the results speak for themselves. Once they won that last one, he became.
Yeah.
He went from, like, toxic to teacher. I don't know what to tell you. Like, this is the thing. This is a very American perspective, but the results allow you to. You can now go back and say, yeah, it's all justified. Everything he does because he won is now justified. I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, I get it, but that is the American approach to winning and championships and trophies, right? Unless you get caught like Lance Armstrong. By the way, we've spoken about sports and toxicity, and we have not mentioned Lance Armstrong until now. That's crazy.
Well, I was also going to say, I know, and I was also going to say that we've barely touched on the EPL and teams like City and Chelsea and all that kind of stuff, and how disastrous Chelsea's been since Bowley bought them, and like, oh,
well,
that wage bill.
For all of your talk of baseball this episode, we haven't mentioned the main toxic thing, which was steroids. That turned me off the sport completely. And even just sort of, there's a lot of, like, toxic elements within baseball, the unspoken rules. And Pete Rose, we talked about sports betting without talking about the hypocrisy with regards to an undeniable Hall of Famer in Pete Rose. That's the thing. This topic is so, it's so general and broad, but it's also ever expanding. Literally, we started with an article from 5 years ago, and the last example that I gave was from 1971. With Ali and the fight of the century. So, like, from 5 hours ago to 1971 and beyond, like, we didn't talk about Jackie Robinson, his kind of, like, the meta toxicity with regards to a black person not being able to play or whatever. But I don't want to go into history. That's the thing. I'm much more interested in looking forward. And that's why I'd asked you that question about, will there ever be too much? Are we in a sports bubble where at some point fans are like, yo, this isn't the sport I recognize. There's nothing grassroots about this anymore. It's not even, for example, let's with regards to the NBA, you asked if I watch it. I only watch the finals, to be honest. I don't even watch the playoffs anymore because the NBA is not basketball. Does that make sense? The NBA
it's a business.
But the NBA, the sport that we watch, is not basketball. That's one version of basketball because the way they ref nowadays, you're not allowed to play defense. The 2004 Detroit Pistons team would not be allowed to exist. A guy like Ben Wallace or Charles Oakley, they're extinct.
Rasheed Wallace, like they would be flagrants 1 and 2 on every bloody play. Like, you'd end up having no players left on the bench.
And so, like, that, and those are the guys who I used to watch. I really enjoyed watching play because they're characters. Dennis Rodman, he's not a scorer. He's a defensive specialist. He's a rebound. If he's on offense, he's a rebounder. Otherwise, he's just a defensive specialist. That player cannot necessarily exist. So I don't consider, when I watch the NBA now, you have to remind yourself that this is not even football. In front of me, you've mentioned running backs quite a bit. Running backs are kind of extinct in football because the rules permit a quarterback to get away with murder or a wide receiver to get away with murder, or the cornerback to not touch anything. I mean, when you watched clips of Jerry Rice and what he had to deal with and the numbers he produced after dealing with all those dirty plays, these guys, these wide receivers today, I mean, you get like touched and it's a whistle. You get touched and it's a whistle. And there's some parts of it safety, but most of it is viewing. This is the thing. They talk about safety, but it's all about the entertainment eyeball aspect. More baskets means more people are watching. Steph Curry with a three-pointer, a swish three-pointer is better TV than Ben Wallace and a 72-79 game scoreline.
See, and that's why I find as well, I mean, before we're going to have to wrap up soon, but before we wrap up, I also want to mention the fact that the whole discussion of who's better, MJ or LeBron, I think within itself, that whole discussion, that whole topic is toxic, because we're talking about two different eras of basketball. Now, I would say because of LeBron's sheer size, he would be still very successful in the era that Jordan played. Because he's a big dude. Like and the thing is that LeBron uses his body quite a bit. Probably not as much now because of his age and his body's hurting and all that kind of stuff. But because of his size, he would have had more leeway in that type of league where it was more physical, that he could have used his size to his advantage even more. But even still, like, he still gets favorable calls anyway. So, like, you know, there are times when LeBron doesn't get called for a charge, let's say, for example, when he probably should be. But again, like, we're talking MJ revolutionized basketball. He changed basketball in its time. LeBron, I don't think he did much to really. I'm not going to say he didn't revolutionize basketball. He didn't change it, in my mind, as much as Jordan did in terms of play. However, one of the things that LeBron did, which was different, was the fact that his sheer size was not normal for someone to play point as much as he would. And that's just because he ended up running the court, because that's just the way, that's who he is. He big guy, but athletic and agile and able to do these plays that a point guard normally would do, who's normally smaller than him, type of thing. So I guess you can say in that sense he changed the fit of what a point guard would be in terms of size, body size.
Yeah, I mean, you could even argue really. I love LeBron, by the way. Everyone, like, I love LeBron, and this MJ versus LeBron, I don't mind taking LeBron's side just because I like him as a dude. I hope he doesn't get into any allegations or anything in the near future. You don't have to have that caveat, but
well, you think it would have happened by now, considering how long he's been in the league for?
You would think, but Bill Cosby.
Yeah.
Yao Ming.
Well, then let's not. I mean, didn't he have MJ and his betting issues and the fact that he's run Charlotte into the ground?
Republicans buy sneakers too. Forget, for me, I can't get past that statement. At your prime, being an Ali fan, I can't get past that. When you're at your prime and that's the statement you made, that's the statement you made. Yeah. Sure, you can change, but I don't. That's the thing. I don't think you've changed versus you become more marketing savvy. Just in terms of revolution, MJ changed the game in terms of literally they were Jordan rules. They had to change the refereeing around this player. Yao Ming, I would argue, was an even bigger cultural revolution than LeBron James, right? Like, just he's the one who clued in people in China. Like, once you get to China, you got 1 billion people there. And I just wanted to backtrack while we're talking. For some reason, Yao Ming came in. I think there's also been a denialism within North America about the spread of American or North American sports. So like Slovenia and Germany, these like Dirk Nowitzki, Luka Doncic countries, or Spain, the Gasol brothers and stuff. I just don't think they realize just how quickly the world has caught up to those sports. And that's what I meant about, like, the US has not necessarily upped their game in other sports, but other countries have upped their game in other sports. Is that fair? Do you get what I mean? Just, I don't know. That was a
good
random
example. Thought. No, a good example just now, the World Baseball Classic. Japan beat the United States in the final.
Otani versus Trout, and Otani wins. Strike him
And I
out.
loved watching it. I love and I especially love watching the games in Japan because I love the freaking crowds in Japan. They're freaking amazing. It's on my bucket list. I want to go do a baseball tour in Japan. It'd be freaking amazing. I love it.
With that, let's end on a very happy note. Baseball crowds in Japan, absolutely. I am totally down. Those guys know how to party like nerds, and I'm totally down. Let's
Yeah.
end our sports and toxicity debate with Japan, baseball crowds in Japan. How about that? A happy ending?
Where it's seemingly not toxic because like there's a huge level of respect there.
There's a respect
It's a
thing.
very different culture.
There's a respect thing. There's the cleaning up of the stadium. You don't necessarily hear of players going into the stands or fans coming into the players area. Yeah, it's a very wholesome picture, which is really why I want to wrap it up at this point. Let's have a happy ending to a really brutal conversation. Sports and
I know.
toxicity.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it.
But good for you, Japan, by the way. Way to do it. Way to show the world how to win a true World Series. Especially the boy Otani. You're about to get paid, son. Rashid,
My God,
any
he's gonna get paid.
anything to sign off with or buzz?
Anything to sign off with? I'm excited for the Blue Jay season. That's all. I don't know. I don't know what else to say about from that. Opening day is tomorrow in baseball, March 30th, and I'm pretty excited to see what happens this season.
Well.